go back up to the stars again in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to thank a number of people who made this, I believe, the best shake-up ever. We've been guided throughout this process by a really terrific board of advisors. I think we're going to show them up on the screens, but they have been instrumental in helping us get really great speakers here. You know, 70% of the people who come to Atlanta for Shake-Up are not from Atlanta. And it's amazing. I think this year we've had people from Brazil, from Sweden, from the UK. We always have a large non-Atlanta audience, and it's great to bring all the best thinkers in Atlanta, all the great brands and the Coca-Colas and the Jamie Turners and everybody. It's great to bring you guys together with people from all over the world. So thanks to our advisors. Yeah, that's coming. Thanks to all of our sponsors and partners for supporting the event. And again, a special thanks to Trax for powering the fantastic conversation happening on social. Thanks to all our speakers. Thanks to the fantastic team at Association Planners of Georgia. They have been a true partner for the last 3 years. They have saved our asses in so many ways. Thank you so much to Susan and her team. Please, round of applause for Eugene. And a big thanks to the W Midtown. I don't know about you guys, but the food here is fabulous. And I think they've got the friendliest service actually down in the green room. They've got specially framed sort of, you know, charts about how you treat people, and it's been interesting to read those. You can really see how well the staff here is trained, but also just so happy to help you with what you need and want. So big thanks to the W Midtown. And just in case, a number of people that I started talking to in February and March had no idea that we moved the conference from September back to June. So just so, you know, there are no excuses this year. We will be back in June next year, so plan your calendars accordingly. If you need to get budget for it, just let us know. We'll help you with whatever justifications you need, but we'll hope to see you again at roughly the same time next year in June here in Atlanta. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank my terrific team at Social Media Today. Particularly Caitlin McCullough, excuse me. Caitlin, where are you? Where the hell are you? Please, in the back there, please thank Caitlin McCullough. Unbelievable job of attention to detail and incredible taste and judgment. I mean, I don't know how many of you have ever tried to run events before, but it's a special hell, and I think you brought us all through this really gracefully and beautifully, Caitlin. Thank you so much. Big thanks to the amazing job program. I barely programmed this year's agenda. That's because Mary Ellen Egan. Mary Ellen, where are you? I had please raise your hand. I know you've all gotten to, you're a speaker, I know, and a moderator, I know you've gotten to know Mary Ellen very well, and she does an amazing job. Amelia, you're here. Emily, raise your hands, guys. Did I forget anybody? MJ! MJ, where the hell are you? And a special shout out, because when we were thinking, there she is in the back of the room, when we were thinking who would be the best person we could get to close out Shake Up this year, MJ said, George Takei. So thank you so much for that inspiration, MJ. So, welcome back. This is the last part of our program. And to introduce our speaker, we have asked Jeff Graham, who is the Executive Director of Georgia Equality, to introduce our final keynote speaker. Georgia Equality is the largest LGBTQ advocacy organization here in the state of Georgia and works year-round to pass pro-equality legislation and elect fair-minded elected officials. Please give a round of applause to Jeff Graham.
So it is quite an honor today to be able to introduce George Takei. When I was a child, rushing home from school to watch Star Trek, I had no idea the adventures that would lie ahead for me. And I would have no idea how the next speaker would impact my life as a gay man and my life as an activist and someone who cares about social justice. For George Takei, his many accomplishments include running for the LA City Council, a seat that he lost by only 1,100 votes, serving on numerous boards and commissions, and responding frequently, patiently, and in real time to slurs and attacks from the stupid people and organizations who attack gay people, Asian people, and Howard Stern cast members. He has written 4 books, received numerous awards from the government of Japan, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, and even has an asteroid named after him. He is the subject of the documentary To Be Takei, and has lent his name and celebrity to the cause of human rights, marriage rights, and because of his childhood experiences in a Japanese internment camp, he has been particularly astute about the dangers of overzealous anti-terrorist laws. His incredibly active life, his wit and intelligence have been shared abundantly on social media. People who are a third of his age should be so fortunate to have as many Twitter followers and Facebook fans, and to understand so well the power of networks and technology. Early on, he saw the power of visuals to connect emotionally with his followers, and his natural humor translates easily into the media. He is a personal brand for the ages. He is someone who is able to take difficult conversations and issues with humor and accessibility to teach us all what it means to be better people towards each other. Please join me in welcoming George Takei here to the Shake Up Conference.
Oh my. Thank you, Jeff, for that very generous introduction, and thank you for that warm welcome. It's great to be here with you on your final moments after 2 intense days of your work on finding the most effective way to use social media for your work, whether it be marketing or public relations or advertising or communication, because communicating with each other is what makes our society economically vibrant and healthy. And that communication, staying communicated, is what we're all about today. And I thought it was an interesting coincidence here at this hotel. When you step onto some of the elevators and the doors close, on the back of those doors it says, "Stay connected." That's the theme of our discussion here, and that connection is what we're all about. I'm here because I guess I represent the technological future. You've seen me on television soaring through the galaxies on an amazing starship named the Starship Enterprise. And we, by that image, want to build that future. And we can build that future by keeping this a vibrant society that recognizes the rich diversity and contributing to a healthy economy. But we also need to be connected to our past, because we can learn a great deal from the past. But there is a chapter of our American history which I lived through that too many Americans don't know anything about. And those that do have very little understanding of that. And so I'd like to share with you that experience and how it contributed to who I am today. On December 7th, 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and overnight we were plunged into a second world war that changed the lives of everyone on this planet. But for a small minority here in the United States, that change was catastrophic. People looked at Japanese Americans, American citizens of Japanese ancestry, with suspicion and fear and outright hatred, simply because we happened to look like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, and yet we looked like them. And the nation was swept up by this hysteria. But despite that, young Japanese Americans, like all young Americans, rushed to their recruitment centers to volunteer to serve in the military. That act of patriotism was answered with a slap on the face. They were denied military service and categorized as enemy non-aliens. It was outrageous to call people who were volunteering to fight for this country, perhaps even die for this country, as the enemy. But that outrage was compounded by the second word, non-alien. What does that mean, non-alien? That's a citizen defined in the negative. They even took the word citizen away from us. And the hysteria continued, and it continued to grow until it swept up the presidency of the United States. On February 19, 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast to be summarily rounded up with no charges, therefore no trial. You need charges to challenge in order to have a trial. The central pillar of our justice system, due process, simply disappeared. We were rounded up and imprisoned in 10 barbed wire prison camps in some of the most godforsaken places in this country. The blistering hot desert of Arizona, the sultry swamps of southeastern Arkansas, where my family, together with my siblings, were incarcerated. There were camps on the cold, windswept high plains of Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and two of the most desolate places in California. On April 20th, 1942, I turned 5 years old, and a few weeks after my 5th birthday, my parents got me up very early one morning together with my siblings, a brother a year younger, and a baby sister not even a year old yet. They dressed us hurriedly, and my brother and I were told to wait in the living room while my parents finished packing. The two of us were gazing out the front window, and we saw two soldiers with bayonets on their rifle marching up our driveway. They stopped at the front porch and with clenched fists banged on the door. My father answered it, and literally at gunpoint, we were ordered out of our home. My father gave my brother and me tiny bundles to carry, and we walked out and stood on the driveway waiting for our mother to come out. And when she came out, she had our baby sister in one arm, a huge duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down her face. I can never forget that terrifying morning. It's been decades since. A little bit less than 75 years, but that memory is burnt into my mind. We were loaded onto trucks with other Japanese American families that had been gathered and taken to the railroad station, where we were loaded onto railroad cars with soldiers at both ends of each car. And we were transported 2/3 of the way across the country to the swamps of southeastern Arkansas. I still remember those barbed wire fences that confined us. I remember the tall sentry towers with machine guns pointed at us. I remember the searchlight that followed me when I made the night runs to the latrine. For my parents, it was a degrading, humiliating, invasive light that followed them. But to 5-year-old me, I thought it was kind of nice that they lit the way for me to pee. Children are amazingly adaptable. What would be grotesquely abnormal became my normality behind those barbed wire fences. It became routine for me to line up every day, 3 times a day, to eat lousy food in a noisy mess hall. It became routine for me to go with my father to bathe in a mass shower. And it became normal for me to go to school in a black tar paper barrack and begin the school day with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. I could see the barbed wire fence and the sentry tower right outside my schoolhouse window as I recited the words, "With liberty and justice for all." An innocent child, just mouthing the words that the teacher had taught. 1 year into imprisonment, the government realized that there was a wartime manpower shortage, and here were all these people that they had categorized as enemy non-aliens. How to tap that manpower? They came down with a sloppily put together loyalty questionnaire a year into imprisonment. It was a series of about 30 questions that had to be responded to by everyone in all 10 camps over the age of 17. But there were 2 questions that turned all 10 camps into turmoil. Question 27 asked, "Will you bear arms to defend the United States of America?" This being asked of a 17-year-old young man as well as an 87-year-old immigrant lady. It was preposterous. Question 28 was the most insidious of them all. It was one sentence with 2 opposite ideas. It asked, "Will you swear your loyalty to the United States of America and forswear your loyalty to the Emperor of Japan?" We're Americans. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. My father was a San Franciscan. They met and married in Los Angeles, where we were born. For the government to assume that we have some genetic, organic loyalty to the emperor was offensive. It was outrageous. So if you answered no, I don't have loyalty to the emperor to forswear, then you were answering no to the first part of the very same sentence. Will you swear your loyalty to the United States? If you answered yes, meaning I do swear my loyalty to the United States, then you were confessing that you had been loyal to the emperor and now was ready to forswear it, set it aside, and repledge your loyalty to the United States. It was an outrageous loyalty questionnaire. There were young men who ignored the loyalty questionnaire. They said, "I'm an American and I will fight for my country, but I will fight as an American. If I can report to my hometown draft board with my family back home, I will fight for my country, but I will not go as an internee, leaving my family in imprisonment." And for that gutsy, principled, very American stand, they were tried for draft evasion, found guilty, and thrown into federal penitentiaries, mostly to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. And they served hard time as patriotic, strong Americans. And the other amazing part of this is that thousands of young Japanese American men and women bit the bullet, swallowed the bitter taste, and answered those two questions the way the government wanted them to, with 2 yeses, and went from behind those barbed wire fences to fight for this country. The men were put into a segregated all-Japanese-American unit, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. They selected as their regimental motto, "Go for broke." They were determined to give it their all. They were sent to the battlefields of Europe and ordered out onto the most dangerous missions. They were literally used like cannon fodder, and they fought with incredible, fierce determination, with amazing courage. They sustained the highest combat casualty rate of the entire war, percentage-wise. And when the war ended, they came back the single most decorated unit of any unit of the entire Second World War. They had 8 Presidential Unit citations, thousands of Purple Hearts, and 21 of the men eventually got the Medal of Honor, the highest military recognition the nation can grant. They were welcomed back to the United States on the White House lawn by President Truman, who said to them, "You fought not only the enemy, but prejudice, and you won." But they also came back with a stinging irony. The American flag that covered those that perished on those bloody battlefields were brought back to their widows or their parents, still behind American barbed wire fences. The war ended, and the gates of the internment camps were open for us to go free. But we were literally penniless. They had taken everything from us. They offered a one-way ticket to anywhere in the United States that you wanted to move to, plus $25 each. My parents decided to come back to Los Angeles, where we started out. But the hostility was still intense. Jobs and housing were well nigh impossible to get. Our first home back in Los Angeles was on Skid Row in downtown LA. And to us kids, I was 9 years old by then, it was terrifying. The stench of human urine everywhere, on the sidewalk, in the hallways, in the alleys. Leaning on the walls were scary, ugly, smelly people. And some would become staggering at us that made us stop on our walk. And they, on one instance, this derelict collapsed right in front of us and barfed. And my baby sister yelled, who was 5 years old by that time. She shrieked, "Mama, let's go back home." Meaning, behind barbed wire fences. Because imprisonment was better than being back home. My parents were determined to get back on their feet and give their children a good university education. They worked long, killing hours at many, many different businesses, but with good timing. About 5 years later, my father switched to real estate, where the Japanese-American community was getting back on its feet and buying homes and businesses. And we became very comfortable then. As a teenager, I became very curious about my childhood imprisonment, because I started reading books, civics books, that talked about the shining ideals of our American democracy. I read history books, and I couldn't find anything about our imprisonment. I heard Dr. Martin Luther King's speeches. They were stirring, they were eloquent, and they were inspiring. And so I engaged my father in after-dinner conversations, and we talked about it for a long time, and we had many, many conversations about it. I gave my father a hard time. I challenged him. Why? Why did the government do such an unfair thing? We were innocent. Why did you agree to go? I would have protested. I would have gathered my friends and gone downtown to City Hall or the Federal Building. And And my father said, I had your mother to worry about. I wasn't alone. I had you, your brother, your sister. I couldn't make those decisions when they're pointing guns at us, which I understood and I appreciated. And as my father continued the discussions, I learned about American democracy from a man who lost everything that he had worked for in the middle of his life in his 30s. He told me that our democracy is a people's democracy. And it can be as great as the people can be, but it is also as fallible as people are. Our democracy is vitally dependent on people who cherish the ideals of our democracy and who actively engaged in the process, sometimes holding democracy's feet to the fire. And one Sunday afternoon, he took me downtown, to downtown Los Angeles, to the Adlai Stevenson for President headquarters. And he used to tell people, we volunteered in the Stevenson campaign, but actually, he volunteered me. I just tagged along. But there I was, working with passionate people, dedicated to what Governor Stevenson stood for. I stuffed envelopes, answered phones, leafleted on the sidewalk, and I understood that this is how our democracy works. People actively making our ideas real. And ever since that time, I've been active in the political arena and also in the social justice arena. I was in the civil rights campaign. I did a civil rights musical for about a year titled Fly Blackbird. I marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. I shook his hand, which was a thrilling moment. During the Vietnam War, I was active in the peace movement. I joined an organization, I was a professional actor by then, an organization called EIPJ, Entertainment Industry for Peace and Justice, and worked together with people like Donald Sutherland and Jane Fonda. And in the 70s, when the movement began to get an apology and redress for the unconstitutional incarceration of Japanese Americans, I became active in that. I testified at the congressional hearing on the internment. And by that time, as a demonstration of how our democracy works, we had Japanese Americans in the halls of Congress as legislators. There were two senators, Senator Spark Matsunaga and Senator Danny Noe, both veterans of the 442nd. In fact, Senator Inoue had lost his right arm on a bloody battlefield in Europe. And he eventually became a good friend. And he was also one of the longest serving senators in the US Senate, 48 years. And in the House of Representatives, there was Congressman Norman Mineta from San Jose, Bob Matsui from Sacramento, and from Hawaii, Patsy Matsunaga Mink. And with their leadership, in 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, and he officially and formally, on behalf of the government, apologized for that unjust incarceration and pledged a $20,000 token redress to all those who were alive at the signing of the bill. In our family, my father did not live long enough to see that day. He passed in 1979. And all this time of my activism in the political and social justice arena, I was silent on the one issue that was closest to me, that was an immutable part of me. From the time that I was about 9 or 10, I was getting the growing realization that I was different in ways beyond my Asian face. My buddies would say things like, Sally is cute. or Monica, who was starting to blossom out in full womanhood, they would say, wow, Monica's hot. I thought Sally and Monica were nice, but Bobby was exciting. And I wondered why he excited me, why I was so different from the other guys. I wanted to be like the other guys. And so when the other guys started dating, I dated too, female friends. I even double dated with my buddies. But to tell you the truth, I was more interested in my buddy than in my date. I was making discoveries about myself, and I felt very alone. And as I grew older, I discovered that I wasn't the only one. There were others like me. And I discovered gay bars where I could at last put down all the guard that I had set up. I could relax, find comfort in companionship and friendship in a gay bar. But one night, an older guy in a gay bar told me that the police occasionally raided these gay bars. They would rush in and order the patrons there to march out, and they meekly marched out. They were loaded onto paddy wagons, taken down to the police station, fingerprinted, pictures were taken, and their names were put on a list. This was terrorizing. They could lose their jobs. They might lose their family. It made them do horrible things to themselves. And I started to think, there is a parallel between my childhood imprisonment. We were innocent. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. And yet, because of how we looked, we were put into these prison camps for 4 years of our lives. Everything stripped from us. And these people, mostly men, but there were a few women, in gay bars, who were not doing anything, enjoying each other's company, were criminalized. What had they done? They were innocent. And my activist instincts made my blood boil. But I was pursuing a career as an actor, and I would lose that career back then if it were known that I was gay. And so I was silent until 2005, when something extraordinary happened in California. For the first time, the legislature of the state of California, both houses, the Senate and the Assembly, passed the marriage equality bill. And all that was needed for that bill to become the law of the state was a signature of our governor, who happened to be a movie star at that time, Arnold Schwarzenegger. When he campaigned for the governor's seat, he campaigned by saying, I'm from Hollywood. I've worked with gays and lesbians. Some of my best friends are. And some of my friends did vote for him because of that rhetoric. But when that bill landed on his desk, he played to his right-wing Republican base. He vetoed that bill. And my blood was boiling. And it was then, after discussing with my husband Brad, or not my husband then, my partner, I decided to talk to the press for the first time as a gay man, and I blasted Arnold Schwarzenegger's veto. And ever since then, I've been active on that issue as well. And we have been making amazing progress. As a matter of fact, end of this month, thank you. Those are very heartwarming sounds. End of this month, the Supreme Court is going to be coming down with a ruling. The amazing thing is that activism changes society. And using social media brings about social change. And knowing and having studied American history, we are a dynamic democracy. We have been constantly expanding justice and equality to more and more people. When this nation was founded, women had no rights. The founding fathers said all men are created equal, and apparently they meant that literally. Women couldn't vote, women couldn't own property, women didn't have rights over their own children. Yet, because determined women and fair-minded men challenged and debated and marched for equality for women, that today we have 3 women as justices on the Supreme Court. 3 women have served as secretaries of state. A woman astronaut led a team of astronauts and went soaring out into space. We have made advances. We have more advances to make, but we have changed American society. When the founding fathers articulated the steering ideals of our democracy, at the same time, they kept other human beings as slaves. But because those slaves hungered for freedom and justice, and they struggled for it, and because their children and grandchildren and the generations that followed continued the struggle, that a great, bloody, terrible civil war was fought, and slavery was abolished. But racism still continued. And so the struggle continued through the Jim Crow years and through the years of the Civil Rights Movement. And today, we have in Congress the descendants of slaves who are there as lawmakers. And on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue in the White House, we have an African American serving as the President of the United States. Society can be changed by activism. And I, who grew up in prison in my own country by my own government, am here on this stage talking to you about justice and equality and expanding equality for more people. We are making our democracy happen. Yes, we have a long way to go yet, more challenges to face, but we should be inspired by the advances that we've been making. And as an actor, and primarily a television actor, I've got to end with a commercial. This fall, a production that we put together, combining my passion for the theater, my love for the theater, and my life mission of raising the awareness of the incarceration of innocent Japanese Americans, simply because we happen to look like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. To combine those two, my personal mission and my passion for the theater, in a musical on Broadway titled Allegiance, where we question not only our allegiance to the government, but the government's allegiance to its ideals, to our allegiance to our families, and ultimately our allegiance to who we are. It's titled Allegiance. It's opening on November the 8th. We go into previews on October the 6th. The theater is the Longacre Theater on 48th Street. And so I hope you all come and see Allegiance during our run. Thank you very much. And now I look forward to our conversation. You Trekkies know what I'm talking about. Red was security, and that meant if you were wearing red, you usually died. Blue is science.
Oh, thank God. I think of myself as a survivor, George.
You indeed are.
Let's have some questions.